He knocked out the most feared man in boxing history.
Buster's landing these. Oh, nice uppercut by Buster Douglas. Look at that.
And then lost everything. In just 8 months, James Buster Douglas went from heavyweight champion to rock bottom, broke, depressed, and contemplating ending it all while living in his car. But what really destroyed him? The money? The disease that nearly killed him? Or something darker he never saw coming? Everyone remembers his shocking knockout of Mike Tyson, but few know about the diabetic coma, the financial collapse, or how he ballooned to 400 pounds. To understand how Buster Douglas went from the highest high to the lowest low in sports history, we have to start at the very beginning. Remember when nobody gave Buster Douglas a chance against Mike Tyson? The odds were 42-1. Vegas didn't even want to take your money. It felt like robbery. Most experts figured Douglas would be lucky to make it out of the first 3 rounds alive against the man they called the baddest man on the planet. But sometimes reality doesn't follow the script. Sometimes the guy with no shot delivers the punch that rewrites history. Buster Douglas was born into this sport, literally. Columbus, Ohio, 1960. His father, William Dynamite Douglas, had carved his own path in the professional ranks, making the boxing gym Buster's second home. The rhythmic sounds of speed bags, the hiss of jump ropes, and the sting of sweat in the air. This was his childhood. But he had other options. Douglas was a standout basketball player in high school, even led his team to a state championship. He bounced around a few colleges with hoop dreams, but boxing had its hooks in him, and eventually it pulled him all the way in. He turned pro in 1981, won his first 5, showed flashes of real potential, but he couldn't put it all together. A knockout loss to David Bay, a disappointing draw with Stefan Tangstad. His biggest enemy wasn't his opponents, it was inconsistency, and maybe even a lack of fire. For years, Douglas drifted on the fringes. Too good to ignore, but never great enough to actually matter. He was, in every sense, a what-if fighter. By 1990, he was sitting on a decent 29-4-1 record. Respectable, but far from elite. He was the perfect fall guy for Tyson's Tokyo showcase. Legit enough to sell the fight, soft enough to pose no real threat, but they made a fatal mistake. They didn't see what was boiling beneath the surface. Because Buster wasn't just stepping into that ring for a paycheck. He was stepping in with grief strapped to his shoulders like armor. His mother, his biggest supporter, had died just 23 days before the fight. The mother of his son also was seriously ill, and something inside him snapped into place. This emotional storm, rather than destroying him, had forged Douglas into something formidable. A man with nothing to lose and everything to prove. This wasn't about titles. This was about proving he mattered. To himself, to the world, to everyone who wrote him off. When the bell rang in Tokyo on February 11, 1990, Buster Douglas fought like a man possessed. He used his 12-inch reach advantage, snapping jabs into Tyson's face, followed by punishing right hands. Moving with unexpected grace, he was outboxing the most feared man on the planet. In the 8th round, Tyson landed an uppercut that sent Douglas to the canvas, and this should have been the end. But Douglas got up. He came back swinging, ending the round by hurting Tyson. That moment told us everything we needed to know. Buster wasn't here to fold. He was here to finish, and he did. In round 10, he landed the cleanest uppercut of his life, followed by a vicious 4-punch combo that dropped Tyson like a bag of bricks. The sight of Tyson crawling on the canvas, fumbling for his mouthpiece, stunned the world. The myth of invincibility shattered. In 10 rounds, Buster Douglas didn't just win a fight. He altered the course of boxing history. Magazine covers, endorsements, instant fame. The quiet, inconsistent fighter from Ohio had become the king of the world. But behind the champagne and headlines, something was already breaking. The seeds of his downfall had already been planted, setting the stage for one of sport's most dramatic falls from grace. Because this wasn't a fairy tale. It was a rise built on pain. And what came next would reveal just how fragile the high really was. How long do you think Douglas enjoyed his championship reign? Not long. While most champions defend their title over years, sometimes even decades, Douglas lost his in the very first defense. Just 8 months after his night of glory in Tokyo, the man who toppled a titan came crashing down just as fast. The knockout of Tyson had launched him into a reality he wasn't remotely prepared for. The shy fighter from Columbus was now a global celebrity. Talk shows, endorsement deals, constant attention. Everyone wanted a piece of Buster. Suddenly, the guy who had spent his life in the shadows was blinded by the spotlight. But before he could even cash in on the fame, controversy threatened his moment. Don King, Tyson's promoter, cried foul, claiming the referee's count was too slow when Douglas went down in the 8th. For a brief moment, the victory hung in limbo. The WBC and WBA actually withheld recognition of Douglas as the new champ. It took days of public pressure before boxing's power brokers finally acknowledged what viewers already knew. Douglas had fairly beaten Tyson. But the real threat wasn't Don King. It wasn't the media. It was something more insidious: success itself. Because Buster Douglas wasn't ready to be king. The weight of being heavyweight champion, historically the most prestigious title in sports, proved overwhelming. The fire that pushed him through grief and into glory began to flicker. The discipline that built him into a warrior started to fade. He traded road work for red carpets, training for indulgence, sparring partners for entourages, luxury cars, lavish parties, and a fridge full of whatever he wanted. The hunger that had fueled his victory over Tyson disappeared, replaced by actual appetite for food and comfort. He had it all, and it was killing him slowly. By October 1990, when he defended his title against Evander Holyfield, the transformation was complete. He weighed 246 pounds, 15 pounds heavier than he was against Tyson and his heaviest since 1985. The contrast was striking. That sharp, focused fighter who had dismantled Tyson, gone. The Douglas that showed up against Holyfield looked slow, sluggish, and disconnected. In the 3rd round, he threw a lazy, telegraphed uppercut that missed. Holyfield countered with a perfect straight right, and Douglas hit the mat. But this time, unlike his heroic rise against Tyson, he didn't get up. This time, he stayed down. His title defense lasted just 3 rounds. His reign? 1 fight. Sure, he made $24.1 million for that night, a massive leap from the $1.3 million he earned beating Tyson, of which he'd pocketed just $15,000 after expenses. But the payday couldn't mask the damage. He wasn't just beaten, he was broken. And then he disappeared. No rematch, no second wind, no comeback tour. The man who pulled off the greatest upset in boxing history vanished into silence, swallowed by depression, self-destruction, and the crushing weight of expectations. Buster Douglas went from the top of the world to the bottom of a bottle. The boxer who had reached the absolute pinnacle of his sport was sliding toward a low far more dangerous than anyone could have imagined. And that's when the real collapse began, and it had nothing to do with boxing. What happens when a fighter loses the one thing that made them dangerous? Discipline. For Buster Douglas, the answer wasn't just career ending, it nearly cost him his life. Once he lost his heavyweight title to Holyfield, the downward spiral became a fight for survival. After that disappointing loss, Douglas abandoned the athlete's path entirely. The strict diet, daily workouts, and mental discipline that had prepared him for Tyson vanished, replaced by junk food, alcohol, and total apathy. He wasn't training for a comeback. He was self-medicating with comfort and consumption, and the transformation was brutal. At the Tyson fight, Douglas weighed 231 pounds. Heavy, sure, but manageable for a 6'4" heavyweight. But without training, his body began to turn on him. The muscle melted away. The grace was gone. The man who once moved with surprising grace around the ring struggled to move around his house. Those close to him watched with growing concern as he changed month by month. This wasn't the weight of a man relaxing in retirement. This was someone eating to forget, drinking to escape. Food became his drug, and the cost would be enormous. By 1994, just 4 years after glory, Douglas had ballooned to nearly 400 pounds. He didn't look like a former world champion anymore. He looked like a warning. But the real danger wasn't what you could see. It was what was happening inside. His body was hiding a ticking time bomb. Years of rapid weight gain, poor diet, zero exercise, and hey, possibly some genetic factors too, had triggered type 2 diabetes completely undetected, until one night, everything shut down. Douglas collapsed in his home, unconscious, unresponsive, and fading fast. His family rushed him to the hospital where doctors discovered the horrifying truth. He had slipped into a diabetic coma. His blood sugar levels were so high, his body had essentially started shutting down, and the doctors weren't sure he'd make it through the night. For 3 days, Buster Douglas lay unconscious, surrounded by machines, wires, and the deafening beeps of medical monitors. No crowd, no spotlight. The man who once stood over a fallen Tyson now lay still, fighting a silent war with death. His family never left his side. Each labored breath marked another small victory. On the 3rd day, he opened his eyes, but the news wasn't good. Type 2 diabetes, lifelong management, and a warning from doctors that couldn't be clearer: change everything or you're not going to make it. The message was unmistakable: transform or die. This was the moment, the real fight. No gloves, no fans, no corner man to bail him out. This time, his opponent wasn't in the ring, it was in the mirror. And if he lost this one, he'd lose everything. Buster Douglas survived the coma, but surviving and living are two very different things. And as he opened his eyes in that hospital bed, he woke up to a life that was already falling apart. Ever wonder how quickly someone can go from having everything to having nothing? For Douglas, going from millionaire champion to homeless happened faster than most boxing matches. The man who had just collected over $24 million for fighting Holyfield was about to discover that fortune disappears even quicker than fame. As he tried to recover from his health crisis, another blow hit, and this one landed even harder. His boxing earnings, over $25 million in total, had evaporated. On the Howard Stern show, Douglas revealed the harsh truth. After taxes, managers, and trainers claimed their share from the Holyfield purse, he was left with just $1.5 million from his $24.6 million payday. And even that didn't last. Having never handled large sums before, Douglas made classic mistakes: reckless spending, questionable investments, no savings, no plan. Then came the unraveling. The mansion foreclosed, luxury cars repossessed. The phone went silent. Invitations stopped. The people who enjoyed his generosity vanished when the money did. By 1996, the unthinkable happened. Buster Douglas, former heavyweight champion of the world, was living in his car. He rotated between parking lots around Columbus, Ohio, sleeping in the front seat, hiding from recognition, hoping not to be seen. The soft hum of the engine was his only companion. The leather seats that once screamed status now felt like prison bars. The man who had commanded global attention on boxing's biggest stage now hid from public view. The shame of his fall wrapped around him. Depression engulfed him as he confronted his new reality. Every night he stared through fogged-up windows into nothing. Every morning he questioned why he was still here. Alone with his thoughts, the distant streetlights casting shadows across his face, Douglas later admitted he thought about ending it all, multiple times. 6 years earlier, he had been on top of the world, standing over Mike Tyson. Now, he sat in silence, alone, weighed down by failure. Meanwhile, boxing moved on without him. Tyson returned from prison and reclaimed the heavyweight crown. Holyfield cemented his place in history. New stars rose, and Buster Douglas became a footnote, a name attached to one miraculous night in Tokyo and little else. But then something shifted. One night, as rain trickled down his windshield, Douglas had what he would later call his moment of clarity. That flicker inside him, the one that refused to stay down against Tyson, fought its way back, and he realized he had a choice: surrender completely or fight against impossible odds once more. This time, the fight wasn't for a title. It wasn't for money or fame. It was for his life. What does a former world champion do when he hits rock bottom? For Douglas, the answer was simple: return to what he knew best. Boxing had always been his home. The squared circle had raised him. And now, in the middle of a health crisis and financial ruin, it was the only thing left that made sense. So in 1996, 6 years after his title loss to Holyfield, Buster Douglas announced a comeback. The response was brutal. Most people rolled their eyes. Sports writers questioned his motives. A washed-up champ with diabetes trying to cash in one last time? They called him desperate. The boxing press dismissed him as a sideshow. Insiders doubted he could even finish a round, let alone win a fight. He was 36, sick, broke, and to most, irrelevant. But Buster didn't care. He had something to prove, not to the world, but to himself. And so began the rebuild. He dropped nearly 175 pounds, completely rebuilding a body that had nearly died. The process was grueling. He started on exercise bikes, gasping for breath. Treadmills came next, then bag work, then sparring. Each day, he pushed a little harder. The man who once couldn't walk a flight of stairs without wheezing was now doing 2-a-day workouts. Managing his diabetes became part of the fight. Blood sugar checks, meal timing, strict diets, no room for error. The same discipline that once fueled his rise was now being channeled into staying alive. Then came the night of June 22, 1996, Atlantic City. Douglas stepped into the ring for the first time in 6 years. He wasn't perfect, but he moved with fluidity, landed clean jabs, and in the third round, he secured a technical knockout. It wasn't just a win, it was a resurrection. Between 1996 and 1999, Douglas racked up 8 straight victories. No, he wasn't facing top-tier contenders, but that wasn't the point. Every fight pulled him further from the edge. Every win rewrote part of the narrative. His body remembered what it meant to be a fighter, and his mind remembered what it meant to have purpose. Eventually, reality checked back in. In 1998, he faced legitimate contender Lou Savarese and was knocked out in the first round. The championship heights were beyond his reach now. Yet the comeback transcended his record. Because it wasn't about belts. It never was. It was about reclaiming himself. Boxing gave him money again, enough to move out of his car and back into a real home. Training gave him structure, focus, a reason to wake up. He mended relationships, reconnected with family, and eventually found purpose outside the ring, mentoring young fighters in Columbus. The same man who once stared at his windshield contemplating suicide now had people looking up to him, asking him for guidance, respecting him not just as a fighter, but as a survivor. His narrative evolved from a cautionary tale to something more powerful, a testament to human resilience. Because some victories don't come with belts or cheers or headlines. Some victories are silent, personal, fought in the dark, and those are the ones that matter most. So how do we remember Buster Douglas today? Some still see him as the guy who shocked the world in Tokyo. One historic night, one perfect punch, but others see something more, a man who fell hard and got back up anyway. Douglas officially retired in 1999, hanging up his gloves with a professional record of 38 wins, 6 losses, and 1 draw. But numbers don't tell his story. His legacy isn't in the stats. It's in that moment when he shattered the myth of Tyson's invincibility. It's in the image of a legend crumbling on the canvas and an underdog rewriting history. The cultural impact went far beyond boxing. Even the Killers wrote a song, Tyson versus Douglas, about watching heroes fall, because that fight wasn't just about sports, it was about vulnerability, about reality punching through the illusion of invincibility. Today, Douglas lives a quiet life in Columbus, Ohio. He runs a community center working with vulnerable youth. He teaches boxing, but more importantly, he teaches survival and shares life lessons about resilience and discipline, something he knows intimately. His health remains a daily battle, but one he's winning. His diabetes is under control. His depression is behind him. When he makes appearances at boxing events now, fans greet him with genuine warmth and respect for both his ring accomplishments and personal journey. The man who faced the darkest version of himself and made it out alive is now an inspiration. Proof that comeback from life's lowest points is possible. Even boxing historians have come around. They see the talent, the heart, the night where it all clicked, where grief turned into greatness. Buster Douglas's real legacy isn't just about beating Tyson. It's about what happened after, when the world stopped watching. As a dedicated philanthropist and mentor, Douglas has supported homeless families, provided scholarships for students from broken homes, and opened his home to youth needing guidance. And in 2019, Ohio State honored him by letting him dot the I in their iconic script Ohio formation, a rare tribute and well-deserved. His story is proof that the greatest victories don't come with belts. They come in the quiet moments, when nobody's cheering, when you choose to fight anyway. That's what makes Buster Douglas more than just the man who beat Tyson. It makes him something far greater, a symbol of what it means to rise again. Life can change in an instant. And for Buster Douglas, it did, more than once. He rose to the heights of glory, plummeted to rock bottom, and somehow found his way back to something resembling peace. So what do you think? Was Buster Douglas a one-night wonder or one of the most underrated champions in boxing history? Did he waste his potential, or was the Tyson fight all he ever needed to prove? Let us know in the comments. We want to hear your thoughts. And if this story hit you, if it made you see Buster Douglas in a new light, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe so we can keep making content like this in the future. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.